All right. So let's talk about some Strive updates. So in January, we made some small updates to the navigation as a part of our ongoing effort to make Strive more intuitive and user-friendly. So we started by simplifying the navigation panel, which is just the first step in improving the overall experience. Most of the updates are minor and hopefully are pretty intuitive. We reorganized a few things, updated the naming, added the analysis section. We kind of called it out to highlight it better so people know it's there so they can access. And then we've also unified the settings and reports to make it a little bit a better experience. So again, the settings, we've pulled them all together. So at the bottom, you'll see a link for the settings. They're all in one location. And depending on your access, you'll either see the evaluation side or professional learning or both, depending on your permissions. So aside from being much more user-friendly, this change will allow us to make some much needed changes in the future to make our improvements. So you'll see here in a second what I mean by that. The reports, again, all together. So when you click on that report button, you're going to see all the Strive reports, professional learning, and a professional evaluation. Depending on your permission, you'll see those, whatever you have access to. Now, the other thing that we did was we divided roles and rights. So again, we're putting some things together and taking some things apart. So we divided those two mostly to make it a little bit more clear. If you do have people that have those separate roles, this helps. And we've got a lot of feedback. This really helps divide and kind of see the differentiation between the two parts of the app. So we did that. And now, so the other thing that we did at the end of February, we released this new form management experience, which includes several like highly requested features. So after we went through the feature requests around forms, we discovered that most of the issues and pain points revolved around the form organization, the access, maybe, and ordering forms. So I do joke that when I was at TCEA, I actually had somebody come up and ask me and do like a live feature request, and it was in progress. I said, wait 2 weeks and this will be out. So that was probably one of my best moments of TCEA. So form management, as if you guys are involved and you've seen that, it has a new look. We've organized it in a table view. It allows you to look at all forms in one place. You can search and filter those forms. We have the action items right there on the right, so you can preview, copy, hide the forms. We'll talk about that. The preview now, when you actually click on preview, it shows you what the user, the evaluator, and the staff member are seeing. So again, like it's the little things. So you could also even see if the forms are currently used in an evaluation process. So, little things, big payoff. So this is another thing that making forms inactive. So a lot of what we hear is, I've got all this list of forms. It's hard to sift through all of those. So being able to hide forms was a huge request because we don't want to delete those. They have some data connected to them, so we still need them for reporting. So we created the option for you to hide or make a form inactive. So what happens now, I will say you cannot make a form inactive if it's in an evaluation process. So if it's in an evaluation process, you'll get a message that says, nope, sorry, you can't do it. But if it is like looking at this table, if it is not in a process, then you can actually hide it. And once you do, it puts it in a separate category called inactive forms. It's super easy to restore them. You just click a button and it'll bring them back, but that will help clean up some of those categories that you have. All right. The other thing that we had a lot of requests for, and actually we saw a lot, is the use of the asterisks. And if not one, then add two. Let's add those asterisks because we're trying to get those forms to the top of the list. So We eliminated the need for that now because we introduced a concept called pinning. So you'll notice in the form management, there's a little pin that's there. It's just like a little push pin. Oops. It's like a little push pin. And so when you click on one of those forms to pin it, it will actually pin that to the top of the list. So the way it works is if you pin two forms in the summative section, it's going to just put those at the top of the summative. If you pin it in observation, it'll put them in the top of observation. So each category you can pin those forms. And yeah, and then get those in order. What happens here is that if you're in the reporting or even any kind of a list, it'll put that in those orders. So,
Shannon,
um,
can I interject for
yes,
just a second? This is such a
sure.
cool feature, and this is one of the first times I'm seeing this. And so, all of you watching, go ahead and just start sending in the feature requests for this in Aware and all the places too, because yeah, this is pretty cool. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, just again, it's a little thing, but just the struggles of trying to get those forms, trying to get the ones that you need at the top of the list, is huge. So yeah, thanks for popping in and saying that because you've dealt with this before, so you know the pain. So anyway, yeah, we're super excited about it. So many great things in form management. Okay, so let's review some professional learning updates. Now, these didn't happen this spring, but these actually happened last fall, and we did talk about them. But because we're coming up on the summer professional learning, there's a lot of PD going on. So I just wanted to kind of remind you guys of a really cool feature that we implemented last fall. And that is our digital attendance. So you can actually now capture your attendance through QR code or even a URL, sorry. You can enable it per course or even conferences. So this is in our standard courses, but also in the conferences that you can do this. So just a reminder that you can turn it on again per conference session, turn the digital sign in on. And then you can grab that, like there's different ways that you can share that information with your people in your session. You can export the QR codes in a spreadsheet. They can be printed for your individual sessions. We have even some examples here. You can print them, put them on door signs, table tents, add them to the first slide of your presentation. You can email the URL to them if you know ahead of time. I will say though, just for security purposes, we do limit the QR codes for sign in 15 minutes before the session starts and through the session, and then 15 minutes after the session. So there is a little bit of a window for them to be able to sign in, but that is just for security purposes. So anyway, be sure to do that. We also have the option to import your attendees. So we have a spreadsheet upload now. So in your conference sessions, you can upload that spreadsheet. We've had that in the courses, but now you can actually do that in a conference. So that is a highly requested feature. And we also made some changes to the sign-in sheets, for that you print out for your attendance in the conferences. So I just wanted to call those things out. We have, whoops, sorry. I just wanted to call those things out because this is definitely much requested features and things that you will be needing as you're going into the summer for your summer PD. All right. So that's all I have for updates. I want to pass it off to Jeremy now, and he is going to review some aware goodness.
So thank you, Shanna. All of the things that you just showed and updated for Strive are going to be really, really powerful. And like you said, I used to live in that world, and some of the things that you said were would have made my life significantly easier. So let's hope some of the Aware Premium feature updates that I'm going to talk about do the same thing. So with Aware, I'm going to talk about first the Aware Premium specific updates, and then I have a couple of updates that are not Aware Premium specific. So stay tuned through the end if you don't have Aware Premium yet. But maybe some of these updates will let you know, hey, Aware Premium might really be worth it, especially with some of these updates. So to start off, I want to just briefly talk about this timeline. We've shown this during the updates for the last couple of years for the spring updates. And we had basically this general timeline where starting in 2019, we really started getting some legislation changes. And then in 2020, we started doing some of the technology enhanced items up into like 2024, where we released multi-test analysis. And kind of continuing with that, I want to focus in just briefly in 2022 focusing on answering this question. I gave a test and aware, now what? And so I'm going to hit single test analysis real briefly because an overview of single test really shows how the two additions we made to single test are massively impactful. So just remember, single test analysis provides those interactive graphs that make any of like your PLC processes or even just my individual analysis of doing like, hey, I'm looking at my students' performance on this particular assessment makes it really, really powerful. And you can see those real-time changes and how those kids are doing from test to test. And if you're not in Aware Premium yet, here are some, here's what some of the districts are saying about it. So I'm not going to read all of those to you guys, but a lot of the people that have it, they never want to turn back. But when we look at single test analysis, the end goal is to help you draw conclusions while viewing your data. And you can see that interactiveness of the graph where I can go down to the demographic distribution and filter. I can go to a learning standard summary and see the standard performance. And then I even have an item response analysis. And you can see in the standard performance summary how it's filterable by DOK. And in the item response, I can sort it by questions and look kind of by the scoring type of what's going on. So I get a lot of really powerful information at a glance. That item response analysis is where the rubber really hits the road in super powerful ways, especially with PLCs, where I can actually preview and see the students' interactions on those technology enhanced items. And so if you're stuck in quick views is one of the most powerful analysis features I think that has ever been developed, but it lacks some of that interactivity where I can see those technology enhanced items and how my students interacted with those. That's been a feature in single test for a while, and I hope you're really utilizing it. But let's talk for a moment about what's new. In single test analysis, under that performance summary, we've added a new student list and a set of student list interactions that's going to be really powerful and very highly requested by our power users within single test, where now I can see based on selections that I make within this performance summary. And we've added, you can see filters. I highlight those in this GIF up there at the top, and where you can actually hone in and say, I want to look at just my EcoDis students, or I want to look at my 504 dyslexia students, or I want to look at just this raw score, or I want to look at just this performance level. And then you get that student list generated down at the bottom that honors all of the selections that you've made. And then you can see towards the end of that GIF, the ability, we've added the ability for you to create a monitor group with that filtered down list. And so this works at both the district level and at the teacher level. So if you want to make a district level monitor group or a teacher level monitor group to use in other portions of Aware, this is a really great way to dive into those remediation practices and see like these are the kids that are struggling, and I can see these are the kids that are on the bubble for this performance with these raw scores, and I can make a student monitor group so that I can really get into some deep analysis and interactions with those kiddos. In addition, in the last year or so, we've added to single test analysis the test analytics page. Test analytics has the potential to be potentially a little bit over informative. And so we've added a lot of securities to test analytics that are controlled at the test type level. And so some of these statistics are not just the easiest thing in the world to understand. And so I highly recommend if you're going to have test analytics turned on for teachers or even the vast majority of your administrators, et cetera, we provided a 20-minute overview of the statistics that are in the test analytics here. And so I highly recommend you find that in the resources and our online help guides for single test and share that as a learning opportunity to know how to really utilize and look at this information. And remember, the point with test analytics isn't to just call out and say, this question is bad because it's flagged. That's not the point. The point is to find interesting questions. Hey, this question is flagged under these stats. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means you might want to go look at it and see if that question is doing what you intend it to do. And it might very well be doing exactly what you intended to do, because maybe it was an extra difficult question you added on purpose, or maybe it was an easy question that you added on purpose. Maybe the structure of the question doesn't work well with the discrimination index or the correlation we see in the middle because you've smattered a whole lot of standards together in a benchmark style versus just a couple of standards in one test. So get a good understanding of some of those stats before diving into this and start making some just quick snap decisions because local context in test analytics is super, super important. But again, if this is an area where you'd like to keep this hidden, make sure you do this and organize your assessments where you want it hidden at the test type level, and then you can control it at that test type level on whether or not it even shows here. So those are the updates for single test in the last year or so. Now let's talk about mastery. Continuing down that timeline in 2023, we actually introduced mastery where we were trying to answer this question. How do I know when a student has actually learned a particular concept or skill? And so let's do a quick recap of what mastery is all about. It allows teachers to do that deep dive into your local assessments to basically figure out if the kids have achieved the mastery of the individual standards themselves over a potentially aggregated set of assessments that test an assessment more than once over time. And so these trackers that you build inside of the Mastery tool allow you to pull apart that data and pair observations of students to determine that level of mastery for those students. And this is a preview of what a Mastery tracker kind of looks like. And remember, we're looking at across a big chunk of data by the standards. You got the kids on the left, standards on the top. You get the ability to set those perceptions. And you have two columns where I get to look at either the latest raw score or the total raw score because either is potentially important. Maybe the kid got it on this most recent assessment and didn't, and that's why the latest raw score would be more important. You get to enter that mastery level, you get to filter by the standard, you get to add notes, and there are a number of other views as well, including the mastery overview, which is my personal favorite, where you go into the mastery overview and you see kind of a very high, like 60,000 foot level instead of an individual student level, where I can make some judgment calls on whether or not particular standards need to be mass retaught or focused on a more individual level. And just a quick recap on depth of knowledge and how important it is when looking into mastery trackers. Um, when we look at our assessments and we're trying to determine mastery, remembering and recalling how the questions are asked, and this is a great thing to go reference back in single test analysis, really impacts whether or not the students mastered it because that raw score is just a number. The depth of knowledge and how that question's asked and does it match the standard is an important link to determining if mastery was actually achieved. Because if the kids got all of the points with DOK1, but missed all of the points with DOK2, and the standard is at DOK2, did they actually master it? So let's talk about what's coming for mastery. This is not something that we've changed immediately, but it will be coming relatively soon, fall 2025. We're introducing auto calculations for mastery perceptions. We did a ton of customer research across a bunch of different districts, and this was the number one biggest pain point for using mastery. And I'm willing to go ahead and share that some of the feedback was even specific to say that the mastery trackers were essentially another grade book to keep track of, and that was just too much. And so we're implementing auto calculations this fall to allow districts to control whether or not auto calculations are even available. And then if they are available, we give full teacher control for teachers to actually trigger those calculations and then do perception overrides. Note in bold down at the bottom in orange, this is not out yet, but maybe you can start planning for it now. As we get a little bit closer, we'll try to release some information so that you can do some fall training at the start of school year to help teachers understand and know that, hey, this is coming soon. And when you start populating those trackers and you see that auto population button come up, this is going to be really powerful and help you streamline what's going on in your world. All right, next up, this was introduced brand new this year as well as part of Aware Premium. We gave you guys the Proctor panel. This is really powerful for those school level and district level administrators that have a slew of assessments that they need to proctor on behalf of their teachers. And before the interface for doing this was a little clumsy and a little slow, and it was even to the point that you weren't sure if the test was actually started unless you got that blip on the screen. And so we've enhanced it within Aware Premium so that you actually have great lists of all the tests that you have available to you in one screen. You have quick buttons and status chips. I've got them highlighted in the picture here with those orange boxes that show, hey, this test is either available, unavailable, or partially available. And partially available is kind of a new vocabulary we've got here, where it's maybe active and available for some sections of students or some students and not available in others. So that's what partially might be. And you can see what that status is. And with that, I'm going to use my mouse here. We have a dynamic bar here, and it's not really demonstrated well in this picture, but this bar kind of shows you the approximate percentages of the various statuses with that assessment. And I'll show you an example of what those statuses can look like. And you get a hover over that gives you a little more detail here in a second. And we give you really, really close to live updates on this with this refresh button. And so if I want to see how the progress of the test has changed, I can hit this refresh and it'll refresh that particular test and let you know how it's changed over time. So it's a one-stop shop. Relatively recently, because we introduced the Proctor panel several months ago, relatively recently, we added an enhancement to the Proctor panel where you're not just controlling it at the macro level for all kids at once. We allow you now to control it down at the section level. And so if you're in that position where it's like, okay, first period's done, now I need to start it for all the second period sections, we've given you that enhancement in the Proctor panel as well. So go explore those online help guides if you're not familiar with this function yet, and give Proctor panel a shot. Here's the preview of that hover over I was talking about before, where you can see the different colors and the approximate percentage of kids. You can see the total number of students that have test entries created and the number of kids that either haven't started or in the other four various statuses. And this is just a great way for you to see, what's going on and how it's going on, and then control maybe at the end of the day. We're just going to go ahead and shut it down for everybody and get those kids kicked out. So I want to take this opportunity. This is not a new feature set that we have in Aware Premium, but since we're talking about Aware Premium, I wanted to just quickly hit on something that is not often used in Aware Premium, but it is a really powerful set of tools. It's the post-assessment activities. There's two different post-assessment activities that have a lot of power, but I want to talk about retest specifically. The other one is reflection. But with retest, you get to be introduced to a really powerful tool we call a test blueprint, where after you've given an assessment, go into your retest tab and generate a retest for those kids that need that opportunity to redemonstrate their growth and understanding without overwriting the previous score on the previous assessment. This blueprint will allow you to basically say, it'll read the assessment that you want to do a retest for, and it'll say, you've got these standards at these DOKs, and it'll let you pick an item bank and say, do you want the same kind of questions, but different questions so you can reassess these kids. You get it set up, you get to preview the questions, and then you get to publish that assessment. And then the kids get to go take the retest as a completely separate test with a completely different grade that you can put into your grade book. If you've got item banks purchased for your district to be used, retest is really, really powerful. Even if you don't have item banks, you can use retest to generate a test template that can be quickly authored by teachers in order to provide those retests. So wanted to point that one out. Again, everything I talked about was Aware Premium only. And if that piqued your interest and you're not Aware Premium currently, reach out to sales@eduphoria.net. And I do want to take this second too. If what Shanna was talking about was Strive and you're not a Strive customer yet, this is also a great opportunity to say, hey, if what Shanna was showing you makes you feel like, oh, that was the tipping point, those were some of the things we were lacking, reach out to sales@eduphoria.net for Strive as well. All right, so let's talk about a quick enhancement for the non-Aware Premium. We made an online testing enhancement that actually feels pretty simple in terms of like, hey, that's pretty easy functionality, but it makes a big difference for kids in online testing. Look at the GIF. We've added the ability for students to expand resources or reading passages to take up the full screen on their testing and then recollapse them again to go into those questions. It's a pretty simple add, but makes a really powerful difference. It's probably our most feature requested thing in recent history. And so we've got that one on the board now for you. So go take a look at that and introduce your kids to it if you haven't caught it already. If you're a Lead Forward customer, this last year actually saw a really cool new tool introduced called the Star Quintile Performance and Growth Report, where it's just like a quintile report, but we've taken a lot of the processes that Lead Forward teaches you in their professional development and highlighting various performance levels and looking at whether or not the kids met the growth metric or didn't meet the growth metric. And we've made it interactive so you can do it in the user interface and then print the results. And so you can see right across the top, once you've run it for a STAR test, you can check the boxes for the various performance levels, and it'll look at a prior year. So you make one test selection, and then if available, it'll look at the prior year and then make those growth determinations in this growth column. And we also have the ability for you to check boxes right here to highlight those growth performances or those growth metrics at two different colors as well. And then you'll notice the print button here. Once you've played with it and interacted with it, you can print the results. So it takes some of the necessary like paper printing and drawing straight onto the report. We've done it live for you into the quintile. And then the last thing I want to talk about is Axiom for 2025. If you've partnered with us in the past and you've purchased Axiom to look at and project your accountability, and remember, Axiom is a projection tool. It is not a promise that is going to be your accountability score. Axiom is gotten its updates for 2025, which will be released relatively soon. So keep your eyes out on that. And I want to say and highlight a few things coming for Axiom 2025. We've updated the UI for a much easier navigation. One of the most powerful things we've changed that will probably change your life if you lived in Axiom at all, we've made it easier to select your schools up here at the top. You click the drop down, you can select district or any of the campuses that you have in your district, and it will hold on to it as you move between each of the domains. And so I'm jumping from domain 1 to 2 and back and forth. I can change live straight into that domain and go from one campus to the next without having to start over and go back into the domain. We've made some other tweaks. And so look for those resources when they come out as well in terms of the user interface. The other really big one I want to call out is usually underneath the main page, you're used to a bunch of settings down here. We've moved a lot of them into this overflow menu right here. So look for some of those. Of course, we've updated it to the 2025 rules, but I do want to call out those of you that have used Axiom, we're going to call a spade here. Axiom had its problems with calculations in the past, and we've made some big improvements to that. We partnered with some districts that were able to provide us with some really specific data to help us refine our calculations and how we utilize the data in our systems. Remember, Axiom is only as good as the data that you have actually scanned into Aware, but I think you'll be very pleased with the results. And I want to do a quick plug. Go and find and register for the webinar for Axiom if you haven't already, and you can get a much deeper dive into what's new within Axiom and how Axiom works and what you'll see in Axiom. That's going to be provided on May 28th. So you have a few weeks to get signed up for that and either attend in person or get the recording. So be looking for that. And the last thing I want to talk about for Aware, I'm going to be intentionally a little bit vague on this, so I'm going to use air quotes, coming soon. Don't want to promise any kind of timeline, but be looking for this. If you are a district that's actually actively using or looking into finding solutions for AI scoring for constructive response questions, Eduphoria is working on a solution for that. And again, I don't want to promise any kind of timelines or specific features, but it's currently planned to be an add-on feature for Aware Premium. So keep that in mind and stay tuned for more information. And with that, I'm going to close it back out and hand it over to Allison, and she'll talk about some of the things at the end of the presentation, like Teach Ready, Ask Questions, etc. So Allison, we really appreciate you.